rate goes to 250 terabit per second.
Life, a chance through of the dice. May's pioneering research explores the dynamics of the population as it went from the season to season. But what determines which animals survive and which dies before reproducing? According to Darwin, this is simply down to a lucky roll of the evolutionary dice. The model of the evolution of life on Earth is based on the idea that once you have an organism with DNA, then the offspring of these organisms share the DNA of their parent organisms. But part of the genetic code in the DNA can undergo random mutations. They are essentially down to the chance through of the evolutionary dice. But there is a second important strand to Darwin's proposal, which is the idea of natural selection. Yes. Some of those random changes will give the offspring an increased chance of survival, while other changes will result in a disadvantage. The point of evolution by natural selection is that it is more likely that the advantageous change will survive long enough to reproduce. Suppose, for example, that I start with a population of giraffes that have short necks. The environment of the giraffes changes such that there is more food in the trees, so that any giraffe is born with a longer neck is going to have a better chance of survival. Let's suppose that I threw my Vegas dice to determine the chance of a mutation for each giraffe born in the next generation following this environmental change. A roll of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 condemns the giraffes to a neck of the same size or shorter, while a slew of 6 correspond to a chance mutation, which causes a longer neck. The lucky longer-necked giraffes get the food, and the shorter-necked giraffes don't survive to reproduce. So it is just a longer-necked giraffes that get the chance to pass on their DNA. In the next generation, the same thing happens. Roll 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 on the dice, and the giraffe doesn't grow any taller than its parents. But another 6 grows the giraffe a bit more. The taller giraffe survives again. The environment favors the giraffes that have thrown 6. Each generation ends up a bit taller than the last generation until there comes a point where it is no longer an advantage to grow any further. It's a combination of chance and natural selection that result in us seeing more giraffes with ancestors that are all through 6s. In retrospect, it looks like an amazing chance that you see so many 6 in a row. But the point is that you don't see any of the other roll of the dice because they don't survive. What looks like a rigged game is just a result of the combination of chance and natural selection. There is no design or fixing at work. The run of the consecutive 6 isn't a lucky streak, but it's actually the only things we would expect to see from such a model. It's a beautifully simple model, but given the complexity of the changes in the environment and the range of mutations that can occur, this simple model can produce extraordinary complexity, which is borne out by the sheer variety of the species that exist on Earth. One of the reasons I never really fell in love with biology is that there seems to be no way to explain why we got cats and zebras out of the evolutionary model and not some other strange selection of animals. It all seems so arbitrary, so random. But is that really fair? There is an interesting debate going on in evolutionary biology about how much chance there is in the outcome we are seeing. If we rewound the story of the life on the Earth to some point in the past and threw the dice again, would we see very similar animals appearing, or could we get something completely different? It is the question that may raised at the end of our lunch. It does appear that some parts of evolution seem inevitable. It is striking that throughout evolutionary history, the eye evolved independently 50 to 100 times. This is strong evidence for the fact that the different role of the dyes that have occurred across different species seems to have reproduced species with eyes regardless of what is going on around them. Lots of other examples illustrate how many features, if they are advantageous, seems to rise up to top of the evolutionary swamp. This is illustrated every time you see the same feature appearing more than once in a different part of the animal kingdom. Echologician, for example, is used by dolphins and bats, but they evolved this trait independently at very different points on the evolutionary tree. But it isn't clear how far these outcomes are guaranteed by the model. If there is life on another planet, will it look everything like the life that have evolved here on Earth? This is one of the big open questions in the evolutionary biology. As difficult as it may be to answer, I don't believe it qualifies as something we can never know. It may remain something we will never know, but there is nothing by its nature that makes it unanswerable. Wow.
Transmission of the virus.
Yeah, well, it's a difficult question to answer. The clinical trials were, by and large, asking the simplest question: can vaccines prevent people from developing any disease? For the most part, that means mild COVID-19. Severe COVID-19 is a rare event, but mild is pretty common. Many people are asymptomatic.